This is the Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located in Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Hello, everybody. Hither and yon. Welcome to the first of the non-tech shows that we're actually recording in 2025. So hooray for us. That's super dope. Always a pleasure to be crossing the threshold of December 31st / January 1st, which, let's back it up a bit. We do hope has been rad for every single one of you on every single metric, personal, professional, agricultural, whatever your vibe is. We hope that you are owning it and just really having the best experience that 2025 is even capable of. I'll just put out that effusing level of positivity because I want to be manifesting out in the world so that if any personal or professional contact is like, what's this guy even like? I'm trying to be as positive as I can. Focus on wellness in 2025. Dog, how are you doing? It's great to see you, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to see you too. And I'm doing pretty good. The weather broke today, so that was nice. We had rain instead of snow, so that was a win for us.
That is an absolute win. How's your I guess metaphorical, existential, if you were to sort of describe or quantify in some manner what 2025 has been for you thus far, is there anything as simpleton like me could sort of ask for that way? Huh?
I really enjoyed our break between Christmas and New Year, or the break, because I didn't know what day it was, and that was glorious.
Which I remember in our last recorded conversation, that came up. A little silly kind of period between December 23rd and January 2nd or 3rd, depending on where it falls, where absolutely, that's definitely beneficial. Rejuvenating, recharging, new obsessions, new interests, new things. And so, again, as per... I don't think this was actually mentioned in the frame of the last recording of 2024, but it's certainly mentioned before the Skype call ended. This is a login and flotsam and jetsam and perhaps even other quantities or elements, miscellany, if you will. I'd be quite interested. I've certainly actually taken a pretty, significant movements in my personal life and in my informational life, I suppose. With that in mind, since you actually put that in mind, I suppose, if I'm being honest, late last year. So why don't you sort of enlighten for all of us what you're thinking on this whole, right?
What I'd like to do is do take 3 of a New Year's wrap-up, because this is the third time we've had a first recording in January, and I always call it Derek, Login, Jetsam, and Flotsam, because it's what we threw overboard, what we abandoned, what we noted to address, and then what we addressed. Because we're bad for that. We're in the middle of conversations, and it's like, oh, yeah, we need to do more on that. That's what this is. That's the attempt. So everything I'm going to present here for these articles and stuff that we're going to talk about have all been brought up in other episodes. It's just stuff I wanted to come back to because I liked, or we get a new perspective of looking at it, or something like that.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think it's been noted on the show variously that, quite frankly, we are both fans of meta-analyses, right? We have one of those awesome meta-reviews where they, I love those kind of, like, up to this particular year at the time of publication, and then the survey or the sort of that kind of approach. So I like how we kind of put ourselves almost on a default meta kind of positioning each time we're sliding into a new year, as it were, beginning a new term as far as it goes on the traditional Western post-secondary trajectory, give or take, right? Which is kind of the overarching paradigm that we both come out of, and the common space that we can refer to relatively broadly. Spaces and other areas. If we're looking at, if we're looking at the Venn diagram between our two things relative to what the show is, then the post-secondary world and all it entails is certainly up there. So, sort of surveying how and what has been kind of placed in various settings around the show thus far. I'm going to be quite interested to hear your narrative on this, Grant. I am an English teacher. Narratives and stories are what interest me largely these days. So what do we got with the first one that you have on the list, my friend?
The first one, it got presented ages ago, and it's Kezar and Elrod 2020, Taken for Granted, Improving the Culture of Celebration, Appreciation, and Recognition in Higher Ed. And I loved this so much because when I was in a leadership role, I tried to do this. I tried to build a culture and traditions of celebrating things, even if it was, hey, somebody's retiring or somebody's leaving, let's all go out to lunch, or let's all bring lunch in, or let's have that celebration and that appreciation, that acknowledgement, that recognition, rather than just somebody retires and they're gone. Suddenly the door to their office is just open and the office is empty.
Well, and then there's leading under certain feelings and circumstances, which humans being kind of the fraught, messy creatures that we can be, has been known to happen as well. So, full range of entrances and exits, but emphasizing the human quality. So I'll tell you, it does come back to that. I don't know if it's a cliche. If it's cliche, it's because it deserves to be a cliche. People don't necessarily remember what you share with them informationally. They remember how you made it feel. And if I just kind of look back at who I kind of remember among the dozens of dedicated, committed educators throughout my life, whether post-secondary or K-12 learning and stuff, the ones that land, again, I can't tell you what we talked about. That's content. It's there on the public record relative to a public curriculum, which is awesome. You don't have to have that. I mean, if you want that level of context, it's out there in the public record. But you can definitely remember for sure those people, the emotional aspects of it. So I think that's legit. Attending to that stuff is important. I'm glad you probably are a great leader. I haven't experienced in that way. I mean, you're providing ample, significant leadership on the show, but in a formal context, you're probably awesome at your thing. I'm sure you are.
Thanks.
Awesome at everything else.
I know I try hard. I think I might have shared this on the show one time. I was not officially in charge of a team, but everybody just came to me and asked me and all that. And at one point, one afternoon, where things were a little slow, like a Friday afternoon, and people started to talk about their best bosses. And one person said, how come you haven't mentioned yet? And it's like, I'm still waiting for that person you're all talking about. Because the best bosses I've ever had, or the best leaders I've ever had, or supervisors, have just left me alone. They've given me direction enough to do my job, then they've left me alone to do it and trusted me. And I remember when I was at Mate, that person the person that said, how come you didn't talk? Then her next comment was, you're that person for me. You're the best boss I've ever had. And I said, I'm not your boss. And it's like, no, but you're the leader. You're the one I come to. You're the one that makes all the BS go away and you make me feel better. And I didn't understand that until I was coaching hockey. Like I was living in Edmonton, but I was still coaching hockey in Wetaskiwin, right? Just coaching minor hockey. A buddy of mine.
This whole other chapter, folks. I'm sorry, I have to barge it just arbitrarily. This is the one of the soft game where I go, hold on. Every time Doug introduces this whole other hitherto thus far unknown area of his life or endeavor, I'm like, I just gotta go, okay, wait a minute, gotta annotate this to the transcript. I am documenting it now for not where to watch, but I am where the timepiece as such. And on such the January 19th, I discovered that Doug coached hockey and that he doesn't play or do anything about hockey. All right, carry on. Sorry, just had an energy for later, use or whatever.
The only reason I bring that up is because let me work.
Yeah.
I had gone to work early that day and then left work early because the drive from Edmonton to Wetaskiwin is long enough. And I was too early. So I had to burn about half an hour. And I was like, oh, I'll go get a bite to eat. So I was sitting in this little restaurant and somebody came over and they said, are you Mr. Reed? And I'm like, yes. And they said, I'm so-and-so. And they said, the lady, the woman, now woman, who was a kid when I taught her, said, you were my favorite teacher. You did. And then she described stuff we did in class that I couldn't remember. And I made her feel good. She did not have the best grades and she had an interesting home life, but it was...
You were an island of light. You were a little source of stability and positive sort of reinforcement in perhaps an area where things might have otherwise been lacking in such a person. And that, to me, that effective dimension is a significant privilege, if you want to go there, associated with being an educator. Sometimes you kind of see students or you have interactions in public where it's sort of like, wow, that's awkward, that's strange for everybody. But at the same time, when you see somebody from like across years or many years in some instances, where you do get to be just sort of, and it can be in funny situations. I mean, I was even within the context of a thing where a couple of years had gone by. And I was in an ambulance with my son as a small child in the car. The paramedic who was driving the ambulance had been one of my students, like just a couple of years out. And she was like, we had to go from one hospital to another for like this. It wasn't like a super serious thing, but that was the most expeditious way to get the kid from over to the pediatric hospital. And she's driving it. He's like, yeah, right here. I remember you talked to us about APA. So I can say I talked about APA in the back of an ambulance in a Qatar by a non-Qatari. But still, it's you never know how you're reaching people, Doug. And it's great when it lands sometimes. Awesome. Right?
And for me this time, when I'm presented, I look back and just looked at the title, right? I had a conversation about academic titles in my personal life here a couple of weeks ago, and this title starts taken for granted. And I never want anybody to feel like they're taken for granted, because I know that is not a recipe for positivity. So it's not a recipe for anything positive to really happen. And because I had made a joke, there was somebody, we're all sitting at a table and somebody's working on research. I was like, oh, describe your research. Those describe your research. And it's like, okay, do you want the 5-cent version or do you want me to spiel off for 3 hours, right? Because I could do both. And the research got described. And I said, all you need now is the research on your sheet. You just need the words before the colon, right? Because the words before the colon will give the context to the outsider of what's going on and what you're actually looking at. So
colons are very important in a lot of respects.
Oh, yeah.
I never let any master colon that isn't going to be substantial. If you know.
I'm so jealous. There's a guy I worked with a lot. His name's Dr. Nathaniel Ostashevsky at Athabasca U. He's amazing. If you ever get a chance to work with him, he is unbelievably good. He's so good. But his thesis was learning over the shoulder of giants, something like that, because it's online ed. So you're looking over somebody's shoulder while they're on the computer, not standing on their shoulders. And my supervisor kiboshed mine. And I didn't stand up to fight for it enough. And looking back, I should have, because I wanted to go have teaching across the ether, right? Like AETHER. So I still think I need to write a book.
That's dope, actually.
That needs to be the title. And I want the font to have the A and the E mushed together the way they do in like ancient Greek. But that's another whole.
And I think if you were to pursue such an endeavor, I think, folks, we're going a bit into the weeds, and I'll be telling you, it's completely, significantly, largely my fault. Don't maybe check the website like lately. I don't know if it's a browser thing online. I'm just saying there. First of all, there's space within this endeavor, Doug, to that kind of writing. You can even sort of start putting it out, right? Sort of piece at a time, right? Like, what do we have? Like Dostoevsky kind of writing a serialized novel of Russian existential gloom, or Dickens, right? And keep the debt collectors away, except there's no money involved whatsoever. The prestige, and I dare say the audience is fairly limited and specialized. But hey, we got a platform, my dude.
Yes. And that unfortunately has got gears rolling in my head now. It's like, okay, what? I was very comfortable with cruising through, but now it's like, oh man, that's a really good idea. How do I make this work? My only problem with Dickens is a really good friend of mine, like my best friend growing up, his dad just passed away in January.
Oh,
it was one of those long-suffering illnesses that bites. And his dad was so great. And one thing his dad said to me years and years ago, I was young, and he's like, that Dickens, he got paid by the page. And he did get paid by the page.
By the word. And it was a very miserly amount per word. So that is exactly so. He was writing to, in effect, stay out of debtor's prison, which is a pretty strong motivating factor. Dostoevsky, if you want to go there, proliferate, degenerate gambler, and actually wrote a novella of some significance called The Gambler about it. And it's the length was intentional and in keeping with the desire to remain unmolested, free, and potentially with roof and food, or about eat, right? So,
yeah. And even now, more than 100 years later, we're still appreciating the work that they did, and we're giving them the shout out. I'm pretty sure Dickens and Dostoevsky don't need us to shout any out, but the appreciation is still there, so it still feels like they're real in society. They're part of the zeitgeist.
Well, they had the opportunity to have their wider vision recognized and preserved, and there's a whole confluence of cultural factors that make that possible with their particular works relative to anybody else or any other kinds of works. I'm teaching Marshall McLuhan. I'm teaching a media studies class this semester. It's very limited enrollment, as in there's some students in it who need it to graduate, and so but that's it.
It's offered as an elective, but it's fairly specialized. And so the media class. And so it's kind of a cool thing now where I'm actually now, after all this 2.5, however many years we're into this now, sort of thinking about the future aspects of it, and the extensions of the possible spin-offs through a strictly media savvy kind of manner, right? Kind of what makes the most optimal standpoint, and maybe kind of lean into that, because we have talked a lot about instructional time. We have talked a lot about instructional media, and now we're trying to be consistent with the format of the outputs relative to the messaging. I don't know. I think maybe we have some opportunities in our bandwidth expenditure, right? Our significant imprints to kind of retrofit and future fit. Future fit, yeah, that's the word I invented. Future fit. Coming soon to a strip mall near you. Anyway, bro, good lord. So that whole concept. I don't know unless you want to go anywhere else.
No, it's that whole future fitting. I don't know if that's a word or not, but the Bryce and Mars 2023 article, Planning for Effective Instruction, talks about that, right? That you're doing that planning, and they're about a thoughtful blueprint is necessary through planning, but you got to remember the dynamic and ever-changing learning environment. And how do you roll with it? How do you move with it? Sometimes I would love it. Here's the rule. Here's what you do. And you go with it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. To give a different example, during Hurricane Fiona, I was gifted a maple tree that had fallen down. And I got it slabbed, and I let it dry, and I started to cut it up to use it. And as soon as I cut it up, one of the pieces went whoop. It's not straight anymore. It was straight before, and then it's just got this big, wicked shimmy. So I had the plan. I figured out how to do it. I have the tools, and then the environment happened. So I had to, how do I adjust with it? How is it dynamic? How is it ever changing? It would moves. It just does. So it's along that line of you can put all the thought and planning you want, but you got to be ready to roll with whatever actually happens.
Circumstances on the ground trump all your planning, to use a term. Man plans and God laughs. There's no escaping your destiny. We all have one. It's been planned in some manner from the beginning through to the end, as per any kind of human concept of how we proceed as entities within the physical built environments and cultural environments. That was all very thoughtful. That was all really well done. I appreciate it. And it's just kind of oh, please go ahead.
No, along with your quotes, because you had some nice quotes there. The Napoleon quote, "No plan survives contact with the enemy," is one. And Mike Tyson, the boxer, has one. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. It's those two. So it's, yeah. How are you going to deal with the dynamic environment?
And so, sort of speaking to the lions, speaking to the Jetsons, speaking to the things that have been kind of around us, I really, one of the things that I had to do over the holiday period was really kind of reevaluate in a lot of ways how I was organizing myself personally and professionally. I had to think, okay, what's been going on here since I arrived into a new role, a new city, a new community? What's been going well? What could be shifted around to be more optimal? And I guess just sort of looking at myself within a sense of larger person is sort of something that I really try to really put more emphasis on, thinking of myself and my needs as a person from a more holistic standpoint, rather than, well, I'm a worker who goes to work
And when I'm not working, I do recreations. I'm trying to more be just less fragmented, for want of another term, in terms of how I sort of think about myself. Just got to go with various things that constitute my day. And so to that end, I have sort of taken really on to your notion of digital clutter. I'm thinking Doug's digital clutter pretty significantly, to the extent that I have sort of tracked down. I've been talking about this on social media, probably on the show even. The last time we did it, I tracked down a terabyte's worth of old photos or something. From basically period from when I met my kid's mom, so when I was about 26 to when I was 27, up until this is before I was a teacher or anything. This is when I was just Matt Stranick, punk rocker and call center worker with an English degree, hanging out in French. It was whatever, and it was rad. But I'd had so I got images. I got images starting sort of from that as the kind of beginning of the timeline, all the way through significantly. As soon as our kids show up, just document the shit out. That's what we did. We had instant cameras. Yeah. Cameras weren't on our phones yet. And so all all these pictures, all these images, it just ended up on various flash drives, various physical media. And I've lost friggin' all the possessions, shifted all this physical stuff out of my life. I've lived in a fully inclusive furnished apartment and all this, but I somehow, intentionally, as it turns out, made a point of keeping these media. And it's not even my pictures. It's like my kid's mom's pictures, and just all this stuff is just concentrated literally in a physical format. I took all the, you can actually export all the data, Facebook account from your Instagram, whatever, and export all your pictures, not just your current stuff, your whole archive as MP3, as MP4, whatever, like PNG files. Physical media they do not even have anymore otherwise. So it's centralized. And now what I'm actually doing is just going through all the stuff, and I'm just going to throw all of it curated into a great Google folder in the sky, going to throw it at my kids, and it's like, okay, I don't want to have responsibility for this media anymore. And so instead of my usual kind of virtual background, this is a picture literally from Gangwon, South Korea, before my kids were born. We're talking 2006, 2007, when I was living in South Korea in my first teaching experience. Going over to where my wife, my kid's mom, before she was my kid's mom, this was like her area. This was like where her parents live. And so we're talking about sort of digital clutter, digital whatever, detritus, things that are kind of, I'm looking to recontextualize all this stuff to a more functional way. So it's sort of like just, I got these pictures. It's like, may as well functionalize it. To use a term, I don't know if that's a real word, but it's like, may as well just kind of put it in a spot where people who actually would have a real interest in it. And so as I go through it, it's sort of like, I'm revisiting this whole period of my life. And I kind of get to review the narrative, kind of get to review the tape, as it were, on a pretty significant span of my life. And as I'm shifted into the second semester of a new role and everything else, it just sort of gives pause to a whole holistic kind of overview, not just, of my personhood outside of my role, but especially as I'm sort of trying to bring the best version of myself into the semester, into the role as an educator, right at the beginning of the term when first impressions really matter. Jesus Christ on a stick, dog. That was way too much, far too much blathering there, but hopefully not quite off topic somehow. About curating the flagging and the lagging and the Jetsam and the Luxits and spacecraft.
Lagging's my favorite. Lagging continues to be my favorite.
I like lagging because it reminds me of Mark Lanigan. And it's always in my ear. Mark Lanigan, and he's just one of my favorite rock singers ever. I say to you, out of all the random things I send to people on Instagram pretty much every day, I'm surprised more people don't call me on it. Like, Matt, can you just stop sending me this bullshit? I don't get it from any of you, least of all you. Like, here's some rock clip that Doug's never going to care about or listen to, but I'm sending it to 15 other people, and what the fuck?
Why not? Yeah.
What the frickin' crack? So, Lanigan, you say Lanigan, I say here, Lanigan. That's kind of the point there.
That makes sense.
Bro, we got Sunday afternoon where I am, and it's 4:20 on Saturday afternoon. For those to whom it may such things even be a factor. It isn't for me, but it might be for you. And I'm talking to the Rob. I'm talking to the multimedia, talented, good-looking, smart, sophisticated audience that we don't have after the show. And I'm leaning forward so that you're imagining me against a fourth wall. We're going meta. We're going beyond meta. We're going micro, hyper, media meta on this instance right here. Doug, for the love of God, where are we going?
Okay.
My friend?
Next was my favorite word that I discovered last year. So it's Baskamp, Cooper, and Bowman 2022 teaching practices for self-directed and self-regulated learning. And this is a Dutch word, zelfsturing. And I loved that word because it was all about the ability to self-manage that students need for the future. Because so much of what we do, right, we're training them for jobs that aren't going to exist in 20 years. And the jobs they're going to get are jobs that haven't been invented yet. So helping the students get to self-management is so vitally important. And come on, it's self-stirring. I loved it. It tickled me back in last spring when we popped up with it. So I just wanted to bring it up again.
I am deeply appreciative of the self-stirring, and I may start improvising opportunities to actually use it in common usage. Yo, how's your weekend? Self-stirring. Yeah, you catch some of that. Yeah. Just kind of throw it in, but except that would be unprofessional and unwise. Goodness. I like it though. I like all of this. I like this very much. With self-management, self-regulation.
Yeah. And a lot of it is like the theme of like with rubrics, where it's co-creation of rubrics. As an educator, you're saying, this is what I need. And as the students, they're saying, we don't know what that is. Can we have this conversation and build? And that's them taking responsibility and having input. And that is a fantastic comment, right? If I don't have buy-in, I guarantee you how little I want to do whatever the thing is, right? I've done plenty of stuff I don't have buy-in on because that's just life. When you're a kid and your dad says, you're going to help me build this fence, it's like, okay, I guess I'm helping build the fence, right? I enjoy eating. I enjoy sleeping underneath the roof. So it's just life. So to get more of the
on site. Yeah.
So basically I just want to say self-stirring a couple of more times because I just...
Self-stirring.
It's kind of my greatest hits favorites of the year. So this was one of them.
I like how it's a contemporary reference. I like how it's from 2022.
Yeah.
I think it's great how self-stirring has been the subject of much discussion. Not yet, it hasn't on this show, but you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be.
Yeah. We'll come back to it again.
But again, the meta, though, I before I just start getting more flippant and ridiculous, I would say that since the show began, we've been both pretty widely looking at metacognition as something that's important, as being key to self-regulation. And I did my doctoral stuff on the COI, on a community inquiry. It's kind of in my nature to think of things within that sexual framework, kind of, just as sort of at the back of my mind, kind of sizing up problems or situations as they arise, because that's kind of what conceptual frameworks are meant to do, right? Kind of give you organizing schema that you can kind of rationalize phenomena as it comes in and make informed kind of judgments, right? That's kind of what the theory aspect of your studies is kind of meant to achieve, I think. And to that effect, when I see kind of incoming phenomena, the metacognition is just considered such a large part of what makes community inquiry such a functional and such a widely used set of principles, such a widely used set of practices, is that it does emphasize it, because with metacognition comes student agency, and that's important, being able to make informed decisions actually based on your knowledge of yourself and how you actually respond. And so giving students the tools, the conceptual tools, and the technology, the skills, right? The so-called 21st century skills, just basic data literacy, modeling and stuff. And people forget, I think, and I've been guilty of this. One of my issues last semester, and as much as there were things I would prefer to do better, is that I sort of had a Moodle interface that to me represented, well, let's optimize Moodle. Let's see what we can do with it. And it actually was, in retrospect, something where internationally diverse cohort, people with all kinds of different levels of ability, even just to navigate what I thought was going to be optimal for navigation, as it turns out, isn't. But again, optimal visual engagement with technology interfaces is not a universal thing. It's not a panacea relative to how people, even with their various cultural backgrounds, various ways of interacting in the world, can do, right? It's as varied as the individual. And that's just something I kind of forgot. We've been talking about this stuff since the get-go, but if I'm sort of in my function as teacher, I'm like, well, I got to do up a Moodle thing. So what I'm doing now is weekly topics, top to bottom. Here's what you need this week. Here's the discussion forum. Here's the reading. And literally, here's the dates at the top. Week 1, here's the dates. I don't care. I don't care if there's going to be scrolling fatigue a little bit to get to it. I'm not going to try. It's not even a matter of bells and whistles. It's like, I'm not going to emphasize optimizing the format as being important here. I'm not going to place value on that relative to my daily endeavor, because, again, you have to remember that when you're in the slot as any kind of educator, how you are presenting this stuff gets regarded as de facto good practice for what ends up coming back at you. And again, that was something that I get away from a classroom regular situation for almost 10 years. And by regular, I just mean traditional face-to-face interview with some online, right? Getting fully into that with full roster students after almost a decade, that was something where I'm like, okay, that is a significant piece of information. Don't let the interface or even your good intentions for the interface distract from the educational purpose. Only have an aesthetic element if it's actually going to add value to education. And get a bit mindful, get it intentionally. Yeah, good Lord, I'm on a tirade here, but hopefully you see what I mean, Doug. This is all stuff we got to talk about on regular anyway on the show. So,
yeah, and that whole explanation you just gave in that example ties into the favorite article I read last year.
Awesome.
Kirchner, Hendricks, Paz, Waparis, and Cordon-Dewar. Sorry about that if I mauled that last name. The 2004 article for determinants of failure and success in innovation project. Right?
Awesome.
The human factor is the most important factor. Right? Nothing else is more important than that. And educational innovation, hey, sometimes the tried and true, while not wonderful, it works. So why mess with that? Of course we can do it better. Of course we can do it different. And sometimes it's like, okay, it may not be sexy, it may not be flashy, but it works. It gets the students where they need to go. Can we do it better? Yes, maybe. But maybe that can't happen until the third or fourth or fifth go around, or maybe that'll never get to happen, or maybe you need this specialized class, or maybe only for these specialized students or very specific students, whatever that happens to be. And when I reread the Kirshner et al. Article, it made me feel good. And that's a 21-year-old article now. So it's just, how do we do the problem-based learning? How do we have the intuitive and the hasty decision to change? How do we stop that and say, no, what's going to work? And so, yeah, your example of that, like, yeah, you're a professional. You tried something, it didn't work. Okay, now you're rolling with it. Let's try this now. Let's do that now. You did the reflection, and you're moving off in a direction that your professionalism says is the direction you need to head. So you've been on the Kirshner article.
Context is everything. Context is everything. And that is something that I have just sort of had as inherent knowledge. If I have any single piece, singularly inherent knowledge, which informs my career and my whole thinking towards education as an endeavor whatsoever, from whatever led me into it to the current moment, context is everything. That is something that I appreciate and I think is of such significance. And I think what you're saying with this article, I think that there's a very strong recognition of that. And the human factor. So that is, I appreciate your bringing that in as one of these references, actually.
Again, this is my greatest hits of the year. So I really love this article. And I know, how do people love articles? But I do. I'm that kind of person. So
it's cool when you have a chance to kind of take stock. It's interesting in that way. Over at the music show, we have one episode that sort of wrapped up where our favorite things we had for music last year in certain areas, but then with Dan, he was like, we actually need a second episode on the sort of music that didn't make the cut, and then other stuff, like almost intentionally, like he didn't. You two weren't thinking the same thing, and yet I'm involved in the podcast, and you both each suggested a fairly similar concept, in as much as you both choose in your respective things on the show, right? And so for me, if I'm kind of one thing that you're speaking to here with this article, if I can just sort of tie it to something that I'm trying, last semester in fall, one of the things I did at the beginning of the term, for the first couple of weeks, until the ad drop date, I did like 2 or 3 surveys, and they were anonymous surveys, and they were given to my students as, like, wording preferences survey was one of them. And then another one was like equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging survey, right? What do you know? What are you thinking on this? And it's just kind of 10 questions. Some of them are rates, some of them are multiple choice, some of them are just tell me what you think this is. And now what I'm doing is I got that data set. I got that data just captured in the form, right? The Microsoft form. And it exists as something export as visual graphics, for instance, because it resides on an Excel sheet, which you can just download with your data from the form. And then you can do whatever with it. It's data. It's institutional, kind of ad hoc, attitudinal data based on real students who have been at Keanu and gotten access to Moodle and been part of my class. In person primarily, but not exclusively, in as much as somebody could potentially just do the whole thing, even though I don't think that happen. And so now what I'm having to do, students in the winter semester, I'm having them do same or similar surveys. I've also added one on academic integrity because that was important. And it becomes an exercise that, like, okay, regardless of which of my students I'm teaching, I'm looking at just sort of teaching institutional data, because you can't replicate with AI. I can say, well, here's a data set from these responses from students who were answering the same kind of questions you're asking now. So if we compare the results, right, fall cohort to winter cohort, what's going on here? And so that's sort of me shoehorning a few different types of, whether it's technological literacy or sort of giving you the ability to, say, render data in visuals in different ways. It's sort of taking data that originates in some way from within the cohort and actually using it to as like, well, this is the shared data that we're going to use. And say you're taking a media studies class, so how does it look from this standpoint? You're taking the class in literature, sort of from the novel kind of class. What's your takeaway on this as per a Marxist viewpoint, right? Or whatever. I'm being a little bit facetious with that last one, but not even. So I don't know. I don't mean to describe like this huge part of my educational thing. I don't think what I'm describing here is particularly innovative as such. But when I see something like the human factor as being kind of lit up, I've had to deal with all this like AI stuff, right? With academic integrity and generative artificial intelligence. And the stakes are pretty significant. That was mine for 2024 as sort of, I've been guilty on the show of saying, well, okay, AI is concerned as a phenomenon, but it's something we're all dealing with in society. And so therefore, I didn't have a sense, firsthand, frontline kind of person, the disruption that it was going to have on what I consider pretty benign, straightforward, traditional, straightforward evaluation scheme and plan. I did not anticipate how disruptive sector-wide across my thing that this was going to prove to be. And so if I'm doing anything now in the second semester of this year, this academic year, it's like, well, okay, so you can't get an AI to sort of talk about this local institutional data for you. You just can't. So that's sort of helping to promote the human factor. That's kind of your highlight year. Dang, keep talking, Mastronic. Sorry, bro.
No problem. I knew we weren't going to get through the wrap up of 2024 without talking about AI. I was just wondering which one of us was going to mention
by AI. That's what I feel like. Now, like, got myself dusted off. I'm off the crutches. Now, without that AI, they just kind of ran me over and left me half for dead in my performance. Now that we've gone through all that, I want a 2-year contract. I want to stay for longer. I want to be on the right side morally and policy-wise, all this stuff. But that AI that just drove me over, and what even happened there, right? Okay, well, I guess I'm not going to stand in the middle of the road unguarded anymore with this stuff. I'm going to be proactive about it. Again, AI, in all of my classes, I don't think anybody, institution, student-wide or otherwise, is actually going to watch this. But just in case they do, you have to know, any of you, or the non-people, right, is that I placed the current academic integrity policy. I pinned it right under the syllabus in Moodle. Like, here is the January 1st of this year effective policy, 8-page memo, along with the 35-page procedure, how to implement anything that gets up in the academic integrity grill. And so there's no particular appendix or document which says in full neon blinking letters about the artificial generative intelligence aspect of it. But I'm just like, we're going to be talking about this. I'm going to be giving virtual lectures about academic integrity, and I'm going to keep banging that drum. And of course, I'm going to be talking about generative AI and whatever other terms and or acronyms we're going to throw at that particular set of functions, capabilities, and apps, right?
Of course.
I so want to not have a tirade anymore. I'm sorry, bro. I feel like I've been hijacking the show with my
Well, I'm gonna jump to my last article that I'm sharing, and it's the Skinner 1958 article about teaching machines. And this article, for me, it's all about Sidney Pressy's 1920s learning machine. The Pressy's teaching machine is what I guess it's really called. But this was my favorite image that I found for the podcast this year, because I did not know this existed. And I am that guy that would dig down that rabbit hole. And I went
and I wrote it. That's teaching machine. That's a lovely anachronistic industrial sort of looking thing there. That's dope. Love it.
I started my teaching career in 1991, and that would not have been out of place in the teacher's worker at the school that I taught at. Right? There was all kinds of stuff like that. Like, you're just, whoa, what's that thing for? It's like, okay, that's a thing. I'm not going to touch it because I'm moving forward. There's a computer sitting right next to it, and I'll use the computer to do stuff. But it was just that concept. And I love Skinner's comment about cultural inertia, right? Pressy's machine succumbed in part to cultural inertia. The world of education was not ready. And when you're talking about AI, it's the same as when COVID happened, right? Education was not ready for that. And so that was a tsunami of change instantly, whatever it was, like March 20th, 2020, suddenly the world shut down, or whatever that date was where you were living, or where we were living at the same time.
And I was moving from a rented townhouse into an attached home. It was the same week. I can say this now, we're years removed. That was the week that the separation between me and my immediate supervisor went from being something where it was going to be sort of reasonable to a point when it might be salvageable, to a point when the disassembling of it and the functional relationships at work associated with it also, for me, went on a cliff. It was like I didn't hit into my final sort of trajectory into a sort of awkward, almost half crash out of that thing. To that week, it is, and for what it's worth, really, from the fallout to some determinations I had to make, which ultimately kind of ended in the marriage that I was in not being viable anymore. And it's just sort of, you talk about that as being like, and so like, fine, we're not like, lined up for friggin' toilet paper from Costco anymore. Nobody's wearing masks. You kind of get like kind of hairy eyeball even with some folks. If somebody, it's just,
to get back to cultural inertia,
right?
With COVID, the authorities shut everything down. And now, with cultural inertia in education, right? Yeah, AI's there, but they're not shutting everything down. It's like, okay, everybody's got to figure it out. And so Pressy, with his machine 100 odd years ago, didn't have everybody shutting stuff down. It was just the world moved past them. So I just wanted to bring that article back because, come on, it's Skinner. And this is the Ed non-tech show.
Skinner.
So we needed some technology in here. I just wanted that picture. I just really enjoyed the picture.
Well, I'm a huge fan of also ran formats. I'm huge fans of, like, if I ever got wealthy, if I just inadvertently got a scratch ticket that just gave me limitless leverage to pursue weird hobbies, you can bet your bottom dollar I would just be like, Betamax. I'm gonna buy a functional Betamax. I'm gonna curate all these Green Day. Okay, and our final ascent. This band, Green Day, they play rock music. We do title the shows on this show after rock music, so it's not completely out of the way. Actually, one of the authors who has been interviewed and shared on the show, Bob Mayer, wrote the awesome Masterville New York Times bestselling Troll Boys, the true story of the Replacements, who my favorite rock band, which is a whole other thing. He also did the liner notes for Grammy award-winning rock artist Green Day with the recent reissue of their seminal Dinky record, which came out 1993. So it's like a couple of years after Nevermind. It was like the first record, guitar-oriented, that kind of everybody agreed from a punk kind of standpoint that this was the popular thing and it was going to be lit. And they got a lot of recognition. And so he wrote the, updated version of the 30th update, the contemporary reissue. They did a demastered release. That's what I was trying to get to. They called it a demaster. And so what they did is with that release, you could buy a super deluxe edition, which included like on a cassette in a Teddy Ruxpin teddy bear, in an electric toothbrush, and it was just like all, or like the fish, right? The singing sort of fish, the Jeff out that it would end with
Billy Bass or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Billy Bass. You could listen to like one song and you could pay $500, and yet they call it the Dookie or demastered edition, and about demastered anachronistic formats. I had to take the opportunity because my brain just goes, oh, here's a moment to talk about alternative music options. Sorry, bro.
Okay. It ties into one of the pictures that I shared.
And
it's here's what hard drives look like. Here's what all the different ports you're going to see on the back of a computer. Here's
but
it's, if you want like old antique, this was a master list that I actually used. I ran a computer lab for a while at one of the institutions I was studying at, where I was the one that had to make sure the computers are all working. And it just helped. So this was part of my digital clutter. It was like, oh man, where am I plugging this into? What is this for? It's just one of those old timey things.
It's an extremely helpful infographic. Don't get me wrong. I admire the design of this instructional media. I can see all kinds of uses. I can see, geez, wouldn't it be cool to put an H5P off spot up on that and really do a slick multimedia skin on that, interactive. But underlying, as I worked at a call center for 4.5 years. That's the second longest I'd had in a job as an adult, right? And as an adult, that's the second longest I've had any job. I don't say that with any pride or chagrin. It's just call center, inbound call center. And I'm just looking at that and I'm like, nah, I can't let that. If I were to just sort of bend over with a coronary right now on the show, I wouldn't want that to be like the last image that I took with me. It's interesting and it's powerful. I'm not ready for it, Doug. I do like this other one. How long to nap? This is a greatly helpful resource. I have a sleep disorder. Surprise, surprise, I do. And so I look at this and I go, here's some news I can use. What's your view on this one, my friend?
I used to teach my students that even though I was teaching education or even though I was teaching K-12, it was like naps are important. And sometimes you feel dopey after a nap. It's like, here's why. Here's the healthiest way to nap. If you're going to do it, here's how you do it. Here's why it works in other countries. And it's just, we don't do that enough. I don't. I definitely don't. I need to nap more. That's one reason I love weekends, right? Because I am taking a nap in the early afternoon. And it's glorious. It's everything I hope it would be. And it's just part of self-care.
The only other thing is such a vital, important human activity. What I've found is that every time I teach, after I sort of have like a 3-hour class, even if it's a 1.5-hour class, where I am speaking in a largely lecture-driven class. That's the expectation. It's a lecture class. They do expect you to get to the front of the room, direct traffic, and talk. Largely, I mean, we're doing some interactive stuff, but it does follow, like, I talk for 2 hours or whatever sometimes, and whatever. And it's like, after the class, I can't actually do anything. I realized, like, after I teach for the day, after I teach my actual teaching block, and there's no further teaching ahead of me, I am mentally and physically checked out to the point that I need a reset. I actually need to get to sleep before I can even really have semblance of a normal day after that. I'm fortunate that I live with a 12-minute walk of where I work. 12-minute walk, mind you. And I'm also not bound to a specific schedule because it's we can work on the weekends and stuff, so we're not limited to certain hours of the week. I have the flexibility to do that kind of self-care, which you're describing. And I have a sleep disorder. I have the worst sleep apnea that there is, and my CPAP machine is kind of in the midst of getting repaired and shit right now. So, like, everything you're saying about just, you have to take care of yourself. Sleep is such an important part of that. And I'm passionate about it, Doug. I'm passionate about the sleep.
The one last thing from one of those images, we haven't mentioned lifelong learning yet. And that's why I put the picture of the bow tie and how to tie a bow tie, because I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, I've had this picture for a long time. Maybe I need to go buy a bow tie and figure out how to tie it. So it's just one of those rando things.
Anything that encourages fine motor development, usually it just, I think, consensically is conducive to neuroflexibility and teaching your cells at the molecular cellular level it's like keeping them viable, keeping them firing in slightly varied and yet predictable patterns. So the more and I recognize this growing older. I recognize this. It's just like my mom is one of the reasons that I think, she's brilliant anyway. Brilliant mom. I don't even know if you're going to watch this, but she does the cross stitch. She's been a cross stitcher her whole life. Just knitted works were kind of part of her upbringing within her home. And so anything you can do to have a physical reinforcement that kind of, and so I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate, where I have one of my classes. Actually, I have 2 classes where they're specialized. I only have 3 people, and and so one of them, 2 people showed up, 3-hour block, and this woman just sitting there, really nice, around an engaged sort of session. She's doing cross stitch the whole class, and I'm like, I am 100% fine with this. I recognize the value here. So I think your bow tie in here is actually quite significant, all things considered, honestly. So,
thanks.
So my friend,
I have 3 last things.
Take me down. I'll let you do.
Worst question and phrase of the podcast. So, key word of the podcast for me is lagging, and that's goods that sank to the bottom and were counted with a marker to be potentially recovered. And we did some of that. We've talked about, there was nothing really new here. All these articles we had talked about before, and there's a bunch of stuff we didn't talk about again, but these are the highlights for me. So that was the word of the podcast for me. Now, question of the podcast, what derelict, lagging, jetsam, flotsam would the audience like us to address in more detail in future podcasts? And I have people that reach out to me. They never do it through the website. Like, they either email me or they come and talk to me and say, hey, how about that? Or I can't believe you said this. And that's great. I'm happy people are listening and happy it's helping. So for the audience.
I like hearing from Doug that people are coming to him with this, because I never hear, hey, I'm like, maybe if somebody hits a like when I share it on LinkedIn, which doesn't even happen that much, if I'm being real. I'm putting it out there. I'm sharing it. I know it's value. I know we're doing everything we can to kind of get it to where whomever it may be of interest. I'm just glad at least a couple of other people. I checked the YouTube stats, and some of the videos are like, they spike at a certain point. Generally speaking, we got a pretty predictable YouTube profile, but I don't even bother with any of the other analytics. I mean, hundreds of people could be looking at on Spotify. I don't think they are. I have no sleep with it. So I'm pleased to get any kind of response, positive or otherwise, believe me, through this stuff. And so keep on talking to Dr. Doug. Keep on putting it in his ear. Keep on putting it on my ear. I had asked, just to kind of segue back to a few 20, 30 minutes-ish ago, whatever. As it turns out, I lost access through my browser to the website. And so the website either isn't down at all or like my Google browser. I've been massively sorting and uploading thousands of digital pictures, hundreds of digital videos spanning like a good 15 years of my family's life, with a real concentration on like 7 or 8 of them in particular. And so that's the background and stuff. So my browser, though, is just going, you're making me download all this stuff from a thing that you put up in social media. And now it's like, my browser doesn't know if it's coming or going, quite frankly. You know why? Because it's a browser. It doesn't have sentience and no Skynet kind of bullshit. It's like AI. It's like, well, it really is just more hyper-specialized functional apps and tools that happen to occupy based on a large language model. I mean, it's pretty. You can tell a 6-year-old the basics of how this shit, pardon me, kind of tends to work without having to even stretch basic levels of technological knowledge or metaphor. And so the significant problems that are there, aren't in understanding the tools or the capabilities. It's like literally contextual. How, in my setting, does this help? How does it hinder? How is it problematic? How do I deal with it in such a way that it doesn't drag other shit down? And how, in some cases, again, if you want to be creative, it can actually elevate your practice. Well, right now, we're just so much on the, we got to just stop it at its source. And it's like, fine, document it, put policies everywhere, but still be prepared for mass misunderstanding of policy. And it's going to be incumbent on every educator to deal with it directly in an ongoing way, not just here's this policy, look at it. If you don't, you're in trouble. If that's going to be your approach, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be on the hot seat. You have to have ongoing discussions about the stuff, right? Yeah. Sorry, tirades. I thought I almost got them out. Apparently, there was just one more that needed through. So, appreciate you as always, Doug. Appreciate anybody on this. We are going past the 70-minute mark on this one, quite frankly. Fine with me, but just in case anybody else is thinking that we're out of scope or off scope, I'm certainly amenable to where we've been, and I'm really excited going forward. We had a kind of conversation, Doug, about the Ed Montech book. I think I could disclose this. It's coming. It's just a matter of like under what amount of context it comes out, technology, platform, and if there's a hope in hell we can monetize it, we're gonna. If there's a hope in hell we can monetize it, we're gonna just put it out there to anybody who might be kind of kicking the tires of our incipient and upcoming GoFundMe. Oh my God. These celebrities and their burning houses. It's the end of days out there in Beverly Hills, I think, isn't it? Good Lord. Doug, is there anything else, please?
the phrase of the podcast. There was one, but I've just added a second to the list.
Okay.
And basically, I've got the data set. I really think that shows the grounding and the biases that we have. It's like, yep, we've got the data. That's part of our moving forward with stuff. And the second phrase of the podcast was tirades. I thought I was done with them. So that's all I've got.
I prefer to be proactive about tirades. I prefer to have them in advance of needing to have. I prefer I can get puffed up about it in advance, and then when it actually lands and setting, I'm like, I've already expressed it. It's just unpredictable, right? Unpredictable.
Absolutely.
Thanks for checking it out. Appreciate you as always. We're going to end the old recording here. Take care. Hope you actually are having a wonderful, awesome, wellness-filled 2025 so far. We will be sure to see you next time.
All right, on. Have a good night, everybody.